about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Hello.
What's up, niece?
It's you, Mr. Don Neuen. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, but you know it's going to be me. I mean, you acted surprised there, like, oh, hey, it's you, Don. But you did that acting, that role-playing that you did for our beloved listeners. So let me welcome them all right now to the big Drive Time Situation Report. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Don Neuen. On the other end of this conversation is the stellar Denise Simon. She is about to give me my nightly SITREP. And hopefully, now, prior to going on the air here, she said it was going to be very philosophical. And that kind of scared me because I don't even know what that word means. But I'm thinking that maybe I can prod her into going into some scary, spooky stuff, because we really haven't had a very scary and spooky SITREP in a while, Denise. Have you noticed that?
Oh, well, I suppose we could go there.
Of course you can, because you're Denise Simon, the queen of scary and spooky stuff. Plus, it's close to Halloween. When is Halloween, Denise? What day? What day of the week next week?
Wednesday.
Well, we'll have to have a special Halloween episode of the Drive Time SITREP that we'll record next Tuesday, the 30th of October. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, strap in for the ride. Make sure you got your seatbelts on, because we're driving around in Georgia, where you have to wear helmets on motorcycles and seatbelts in cars. Denise, give us the timestamp as only you can do.
It is 8:33 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which I think it might change here at some point. I don't know. Maybe not for Florida. Anyway, it is the 23rd of October in the year of our Lord, 2018.
Very well done, Denise. Very well. Now, what do you want to talk about? Because probably like many of our listeners, I spent today trying to open up Drudge, finding little tidbits of headlines, which is all I got the time to go throughout the day. 2 minutes here while I'm on hold, or 1 minute here while I'm walking over to the restaurant to get something to eat. I don't have the time to really and make you proud of me by reading and getting in depth with these articles. I'm one of those schmucks that has to just check out the headlines in about 30 seconds or a minute that I have throughout the day. So what are we going to talk about tonight? I know
we'll start out.
Somebody stuck a bomb at George Soros' house. That's all I know.
Yeah.
And some polling
FBI
company is claiming that, the Dems stand an 84 or 86% chance of taking over the House. Those were the two biggies.
Well, I have a biggie. No one else is talking about it yet. And that
You're
is...
not going to talk about it? Oh, that no one is talking about.
That is... The news is that Jamal Khashoggi's body parts have been located.
Oh, someplace, I don't know if it was in a SITREP with you last night. I don't know if we had one last night.
Nope.
I heard that. I did hear that. Like tell me where they think they found him, and I'll tell you if I'm dreaming or if I actually did hear that.
They were found in what they call to be a garden of the Saudi consul's home.
I actually think I did hear that. Okay, let's get into that, though, because that's creepy. Ugh,
Yeah.
How many body parts did they find?
I don't know. But it is in fact no. It is in fact confirmed. We have some interesting people that have said something about it, including Prime Minister Theresa May. She said it's deeply disturbing, which is about as much emotion as you're going to get out of any Brit. We haven't had any mention from the United States yet. They may still be, trying to validate this and validate that. Now, Gina Haspel, the director of the CIA, she may be on her way back, but I know that she was there in Turkey yesterday and or today. We know a lot more than our intelligence agencies know a lot more than what is coming out. So they're comparing notes, if you will, or asking questions to see who's, I would say, being hyperbolic about all of this, including the Turkish president, Erdogan, and to determine how much truth is coming out of the Saudi kingdom and by whom, I would say. As a consequence, I think we already know that those body parts have in fact been validated, because it appears that the United States has already revoked the visas of 21 Saudi nationals. Now, that's not a big deal. It's a big deal, but it's not in the diplomatic world. But in my world, it's not a big deal if all of these things are as accurate as we're being told. I think it's just a gesture in order to just revoke some visas. Wah, wah. But now, apparently, there is some kind of audio recording. I'm not convinced there is an audio recording.
You talking about that, the 7 minutes of his execution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it has been reported that there was a Skype call going on during this whole thing where some Saudi official was, I don't know that it was audio, but it was certainly video, interrogating Jamal Khashoggi. And I think that's where this fight had begun. So it was like ganging up on him. And I would say in some cases rightly so, to be honest.
Clearly this guy is a bad hombre.
Yeah, he's a terrorist.
We talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that last week. Denise, do you know whether or not, and if you don't for certain, what's your gut telling you? When he walked into that consulate, was the intent for him never to walk out, or did things just get exacerbated to the point where all of a sudden, they're starting to hack this guy up and saw him and cut him and fillet him and everything else?
When he was in the United States, representatives from the kingdom had talked to him many times to try and get him to come back to Saudi Arabia. And he had been, I think it was really a plot or a ploy to get him to go into that Saudi consulate in Istanbul, because he was there only to get some kind of a document that proves that he is divorced so he could marry the girlfriend who was sitting in the car outside. He knew something was up because he left his phone with her. The other thing is that he fled Saudi Arabia. He was living here under, I don't know,
He was under U.S. person status.
Yeah, he was on a green card, under a self-imposed asylum, I guess. He wasn't going back to Saudi Arabia. Now, we talked to Claire Lopez about this. He was here, and maybe you know the difference. I can't quite wrap my head around the difference between a U.S. citizen and a U.S. person. But that was the title she gave him. Well, he was not a
U.S. No, he was not a citizen.
No,
that's for certain. But have you ever heard U.S. person?
Well, when you're here under a legitimate standing, meaning a green card, you are considered a U.S. person because you are provided constitutional rights, as ruled by the Supreme Court. We don't like it, but that's the way it is.
Okay.
So there's really no distinction being a foreign national, but if you're here legally, you are treated the same as a U.S. citizen, but you're not a U.S. citizen, so you are a U.S. person, I suppose.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, so you're saying that he, first of all, that it was kind of odd that he had to go into the consulate there in Turkey to handle this marriage permission form or whatever this was. So that seemed a little extreme that he had to go do that in order to get married, as opposed to maybe some other way of doing this.
Not within the Wahhabi sect of Islam. No, it's not unusual.
So the fact that he had to go there was normal. There was nothing abnormal about that.
The fact that you have to have all the checks and balances and documentation so they know who's marrying who and where these things are happening, that's part of what the kingdom does.
Okay, but that could not be done from any place other than maybe this consulate in Turkey?
Oh, he probably could have done it
from an American consulate?
If he was in America, yeah.
Well, you and I talked last week. Matter of fact, I asked the simple question, if you're seeking asylum and I'm using that term because I can't think of any other term to use, in America, what are you doing over in Turkey? And you went, bingo.
Well, he was going to live there. He bought a condo or an apartment, okay. And he and his new wife were going to live there.
All right. I don't think we knew that last week.
Yeah, well, I did. I may not have said it. But he had bought one, and I think he was going to live there essentially under the protections of Erdogan, because he and Erdogan are quite close. Least of which one of the reasons is the Muslim Brotherhood. And I would say, the moving piece parts of the new Ottoman Empire under construction under the Erdogan administration.
All right. You also said that it was a little strange, or that you felt like he knew something was up. Clearly, the guy didn't know that he was going to get hacked up like somebody in a movie Saw 6. But he knew that something was jiggy. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised that he didn't, he went in there alone. If he knew something was a little on the sideways because he left his cell phone with the girlfriend, and because of prior confrontations that he had with representatives from the Saudi kingdom, I would say that if I were I would have said, meet me outside. Hand me the piece of paper outside. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I don't think he knew that death was imminent for him by a long stretch. If he did, I don't think he would have gone in. But I think if he was going to be part of some rendition program, he was probably a little on the naive side to think that wouldn't have happened, but I think that was the ultimate objective, was rendition, and things went very sideways. Somebody was very sloppy at this whole thing.
Let me ask you something else that Claire and Donna and I discussed, and get your take on this. The Saudi prince, BSM.
Yep.
What is it? Is that the initials for this guy?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Okay. It sounded, and it appears, based on what Claire was talking about, that they pretty much put a fatwa out on this guy, because he had recently accused the kingdom, or BSM, of corruption, which is a massive accusation, evidently, in Islam. You know anything about that at all?
I do. Let's not forget that it was not too long ago that you have some 60 or so Saudi princes that were essentially put under house arrest at the Ritz-Carlton. Right. But each of them were interrogated one by one, and a lot of their wealth was taken away from them. So that was an operation that a lot of people tend to forget. The other piece, and this is most significant, is when the Saudi kingdom, I guess the best way to describe it is they kidnapped and detained Hariri, who is the president, prime minister, whatever he is, the top guy for Lebanon. And he was to comply with some of the requests from the Saudi kingdom, and he kind of didn't do that, which was, one, meet with Iran officials and tell Iran officials that whatever it was that the Saudi kingdom wanted to tell them, but it had to do with Hezbollah and the missiles in Lebanon. And this is kind of where I'm going to go a little bit philosophical here in a minute, but apparently somebody was wired in that meeting, and Hariri did not bring up the forceful talking points that the kingdom wanted Hariri to bring up in this meeting with Tehran. And then after the meeting, they called Hariri and said, how did it go? And he lied. So he got kidnapped, and he was rendered and put in detention in Riyadh. Interestingly enough, the French are those that had to step in and get him released. 2 days later, he's wanting to resign as prime minister or president of Lebanon. And the United States kind of stepped in and said, whoa, 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 fly on over here and meet with Donald Trump. And he did, and which was a very strange thing. So he rescinded his resignation, went back to Lebanon, and I don't know what his real status here is at this point. Now, let's not forget, too, that Saudi Arabia and Israel have a relationship. Let's put it that way. We don't know what that relationship, the depths or the widths of that relationship by a long stretch, because they have a common enemy, and that common enemy is Iran. And we know what Hezbollah is doing in Syria, and we know what Hezbollah is doing in other regions. Then we know about the Houthi component in Yemen, and then we know about all these missiles and all these other nasty little things that are happening in Lebanon, least of which are some pretty questionable cargo on passenger planes that fly out of Tehran into Beirut. So, I can't prove this, but I'll let you and the audience know that a week ago I said Israel has a role in this whole thing with Jamal Khashoggi. I can't prove it. It's just burning in my belly. Isn't it interesting? We have not heard one word from anybody in Israel about Jamal Khashoggi's death.
All right. What's burning in your belly? What do you think Israel had to do with? What do you
because
think they had to do?
I believe the role that Khashoggi was playing, we all just think he was a journalist over the Washington Post, which was a cover as far as I'm concerned. He wrote a couple of token articles and blah, 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 blah. But I think the Washington Post, and I'm told that the Washington Post is stupid and they're not culpable in any of this. I say that's crap, because they're journalists. They're investigative journalists. So they were just giving him cover. And being a member of the press is the most famous operative cover that you can get. It's the most common one. But I believe that it has a lot to do with the Palestinians. I believe it has a lot to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. I believe it has a lot to do with Hamas and Khashoggi's and Erdogan's hate for Israel. So I would say that maybe Israel, can't prove it, this is just stuff that kind of floats around in my head. Israel's had conversations with some officials in the Saudi kingdom and said, hey, you need to do something with this dude, Jamal Khashoggi. He's bad. He's a bad dude. And I think they already knew it, but I think that because of Israel and their normal tactics, they shared some other things with the kingdom, and I think that's why he needed to be eliminated.
Okay, so and I just want to make sure I have this right. First of all, wonderful explanation of your thoughts on that. Thank you. You think that the Israeli intelligence had gathered a great deal more, or at least more significant information than maybe the Saudis had a confab with the Saudis and said, you need to do something about this character, and here's why. And then the Saudis took it into their own control, along with the other reasons that BSM was already pissed off with this guy.
Correct. I mean, the case was built for against this character. You know. Now, I'm not justifying anybody's death. I think rendition probably would have been the smart thing to do. I don't know how things went sideways and his body parts ended up in the garden. That kind of stuff doesn't. I mean, whoever did it and how it all came down, they were pretty rookie at it, pretty sloppy. But nonetheless, Saudi is having to pay a big price for this. Not so much with the United States, because the United States is going to be very forgiving on this, because we need Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia needs us. But some of these other countries, especially these European countries and some of these Middle Eastern countries, the Gulf monarchies, Kuwait, the Emiratis, so forth, it's gonna have a lot of unrest for a while. It'll even out for sure. This is a bigger deal than. It's not as big a deal as it's being made out in the press, as I see it. It's just not.
Well, what do you think? Deal. We only got about a minute and a half here, but what do you think if it ends up coming out that Israel took a part in this? Which again, I don't necessarily fault them for doing so, but how is Turkey and Iran and some of these other Israel-hating countries going to react toward Israel with regard to this guy?
Still to be determined.
All right. When we get back from the break, Denise, would you do me a favor and the listeners a favor and advise President Trump on how he should handle this? Have you thought about that? I'm sure you have thought about that, but do you mind getting into that when we get back at the
sure.
at the end of the break?
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we go to break here on the Drive Time SITREP, I want to tell you about Denise's website and encourage you to trot over and visit her wonderful website. The URL is founders with an S, founderscode, CODE.com, founderscode.com. I also encourage you, once you get there, to stick your email address in the little box there and submit your email. And what you will get delivered to your inbox are all of Denise Simon's articles that she writes. The beautiful thing about them is that you can count on them 100% for credibility. You don't have to vet anything Denise does. She encourages you to do so, but you don't need to do it. Trust me. I've been reading these things for 6 years now, and I think I've only found one or two, and I didn't find them, that Denise comes back and does a correction on. She is firing on all cylinders, ladies and gentlemen. So check out founderscode.com. Sign up for her wonderful email newsletter that she pops out every time she does an article. And in about 3 minutes, we're going to be back with more of the Drive Time SITREP with Denise Simon, and my name is Don Neuen. We'll be right back.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to the Drive Time SITREP, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Neuen. I am the co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. On the other end of this situation report is the stellar Denise Simon. She is the host of her own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, that you guys can check out Thursday night at 9 p.m. on the same radio station that you're listening to the Drive Time SITREP on. Before we went to break, I asked Denise Simon if she would be so kind as to lay out the advice that she would give Donald Trump with regard to this situation with the journalist, the Washington Post journalist that was chopped up in Turkey and has ended up with body parts in the garden. Denise, if you could sit down and have a confab with the Donald, what would you tell him?
I'm not sure that I'd have to tell him anything because I think he's actually handling this one pretty well. He's in front of the press and he's saying, I don't believe, these stories that we're getting out of the kingdom. They're just not sitting well. And what has happened is just awful. And I've dispatched Mike Pompeo to the kingdom, and he's gone over to Turkey, and I've dispatched Gina Haspel at CIA to do the same thing. And we are looking at consequences for the kingdom. We didn't go to their future financial summit. So we pulled out of that. So I think, outwardly, and on the actions that he's taken on the kingdom so far, including the 12 or 21, visas or that have been canceled, that's all fine. I mean, again, this is a bump in the road, and this in my world is a very small one.
You would call it mice nuts.
That's my term, yes.
And from the ones that I have seen, are relatively small.
They are, aren't they?
Well, and that's the difference between mice nuts and rat's nuts. Some of the rat's nuts, that might be a significant problem, but mice nuts, nothing burger.
So I think
anything else you want to share on Khashoggi?
No, not really, except that is kind of the breaking news here. I think I think the Trump administration is handling this thing right. It's kind of like move on. It's
All right. Can I hit you then with a sideways question that you probably weren't ready for tonight?
okay.
You love that when I do that, don't you?
Okay.
All right. There was a big headline in Drudge that prompted me to click on it. And I had about 45 seconds to read it. And it's from some guy with the last name, I think, Silver, that does all these prognostications on, election outcomes. And this particular article was talking about how the fact that, in his opinion, that the Democrats stood about an 86% chance of taking over the House of Representatives in the midterm elections coming up. Now, I doubt that you may have seen that article because you're not a big fan of Drudge, but I would be very curious on what you're following, not necessarily with polls, but just your vibe, because most of the time your vibe is pretty damn spot on. And I'm curious as to what you think is going to happen in these midterms with regard to the House, with regard to the Senate, and with regard to Florida's governor and Georgia's governor.
Well, historically, Republicans vote in higher quantity in the midterms than the Democrats do. So we have that working in our favor. The second thing is there are specific races that will bring Democrats out to the voting polls. And one is certainly the governorship of Florida. The other piece is that the tactics that the left and the Democrats have been using have not worked in their favor. They've worked in the favor of the Republicans, least of which was the whole Kavanaugh thing. I think we may lose some seats in the House, but I'm not so sure that that the Democrats will take control again in the House. I'm just not convinced of it yet. Just not there, and I don't know why. I think we can save the Senate for sure. But I'm seeing some things here. The White House has made a declaration this week and next week that they're going to keep Trump in front of a microphone virtually every day. He's going to be traveling virtually every other day, if you will. And I think that will, and if he uses the right talking points and he says them correctly, such that the media doesn't have to go in and do their dissection operations as they always do, especially last night when he said he was a nationalist. If he just sticks to a script, I think that there's a very good chance we can hold the House if he does that. Now, the matter of Georgia and that election between Kemp and what's her name, Stacey Abrams.
Yep.
What is happening there is interesting because the media, some part of the media, actually dug up a video of her burning a flag.
State flag, right.
In her protest days. Now, if
I
I'm
think
not...
it was 92. It was when she was at Spelman.
And if I'm not mistaken, there's a debate tonight, correct?
There was a debate that started at 7 o'clock, and
Okay.
I missed it because I was working.
I'm not sure if that was actually brought up or not. Apparently, it was to be brought up.
Well, if you were Kemp, wouldn't you bring it up?
I would.
Damn right.
So, the point of this is where we are today with the majority in both houses, and I would say, what do we have, 34 Republican governors? We need to keep the governorships. Those are very, very important because the governorship, the governorships can drive a lot of what happens in the House, even if we lose power in the House. If we lose power in the House, the next 2 years are lame duck. We're not going to get anything done.
Yep, I totally agree. Why is DeSantis not doing better down, or are the polls that we're looking at skewed terribly?
They're pretty skewed. The debate the other night was hosted by CNN, so you know that the crowd was pretty well stacked. Yep. It also came out today on how how aggressive the FBI was investigating him, what evidence they do have on him, and how he has lied about it. Yeah.
All right, bring me up to speed, because I'm not following Florida like I am Georgia.
Apparently, he and his brother were in some shady transactions, and they were taking some monies, what they thought are in gifts and whatnot, when he was mayor, or still is mayor, but that he wasn't supposed to be doing. Well, the tickets and the monies and the traveling and all those kinds of things were all done by undercover FBI.
Ooh, sting. Put a little vaccine on that one, huh, Denise?
Yes.
All right, well, is DeSantis capitalizing on this?
Well, it came out today. It didn't come out the night of the debate, sadly so.
Yeah, sadly. All right, well, let me throw this into your court. If we hang on to the House, and it looks like we'll hang on to the Senate, how many liberals would you anticipate would explode on the 7th of November?
I could pretty well tell you that we'll probably never be able to go into a restaurant again wearing a MAGA hat.
They will implode. Do you not think? If they can't gain power, and they got to go through 2 more years, and I think personally that the next 2 years, if we hang on to that House and Senate, that Donald Trump is going to roll up his sleeves and start kicking ass and taking names later.
Well,
and
everything is about timing.
Quite frankly, love to see. I know it is. You always say that, and I agree with you.
I do, and I would say right now that if I were Mitch McConnell, if I were Kevin McCarthy, if I were the chairman of the House Oversight and some of these other things, I would be calling for criminal investigations, and even open them up with the Oversight Committee if the DOJ doesn't want to own it, on where we are with this whole Honduran, Central America insurgency.
All right, where is that at right now?
They're resting.
What's your gut and research telling you to tell me?
Well, I've said it for a very long time, and I still can't seem to get anybody to take some ownership. But, you know, the Democrats are all blaming the Republicans. You don't care about human rights, and you don't care about this, and, you know, these poor people, and they blah, 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 blah. Well, the Democrats didn't care about the farmers in South Africa, did they? The Democrats didn't care about the Hondurans going all the way back to the beginning of the Obama administration, because this is not a new phenomenon in Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala or Venezuela or Syria. I mean, have you heard Kamala Harris say how awful it is that there are more Syrians that live outside of their home country than in their home country? Has she said that once? Cory Booker.
Probably not even aware of that.
So I would say that these Republicans are not getting the talking points that they need to be getting. Now let's take it a step further, shall we, on Honduras.
Wait a minute. Before you do that, I want to bring up to the listeners how many times you have said that very same statement. The Republicans are not bringing up the talking points. The Republicans are not bringing up the talking points. Denise, if I had a quarter for every time you mentioned that, on a SITREP radio show, I could take a stellar vacation. They do not bring them up. They do not shoot with buckshot.
No, they don't.
Yeah, and it's a recipe for disaster.
Well, I mean, it already is a disaster because of the accomplishments of where we are today, as opposed to where we were at the end of the Obama administration. We shouldn't have to worry about the House of Representatives.
We shouldn't have to worry about much of anything. This ought to be a red wave like nothing ever seen, nothing ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to tell you, Denise, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, and the listeners, I have never seen political behavior like I have in the past 2 years. I thought that the 8 years of Obama's reign were some appalling things, and many things were appalling. But I have seen a vile, disgusting behavior out of the left. And I'm going to say it again. I've said it weeks on this show. I no longer can identify with a liberal. I can't find any common ground with a liberal or a progressive. It's like they're a foreign entity to me. Do you agree with me?
No argument from me, but I've accepted it. So I mean, it's as common as a houseplant to me.
Well, I keep bringing it up and I keep beating that damn drum because the only way we can defeat this stuff, the only way we can defeat it is to outvote them. And our beloved listeners, you and Donna and me, all of us have got to get out and vote red. I had a listener, a Cowboy Logic listener, hit me with an email and say, I live in this particular state, and this guy that is running, I don't like him at all. He's not a conservative. He's almost like a plant from the Democrats. And I said, doesn't matter. You got to vote Republican. We can deal with the occasional bad politician. What we cannot deal with is losing the House of Representatives or the Senate. That we can't deal with.
Well, the one thing that I think disturbs me the most is, we can only vote for those, in our district or in our state. I can't go vote over in a Nevada, election or whatever. But what disturbs me is that voters have a responsibility to see what is happening in virtually every state. Because if they have any influence or any families, they need to be collaborating with them to say, let me tell you about your candidate and blah, 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 because this is what is happening. And they may not know that. So we have a national responsibility, just not a local responsibility. And people I don't think a lot of people realize the depth of their votes. It is a duty to understand the very large picture and not if someone is going to protect your Medicare or if someone is going to, vote for the continuation of, Obamacare. You see what I'm saying? We have to look at the much larger picture here. You get these, and that's why we're paying attention to the Cinema McSally race in Arizona. Yep. That's why we're paying attention to Georgia or what is happening with Dan Heller. We have to look at all of these things. The Alabama race that we just went through with Roy Moore and that whole nonsense.
Yep. Hey, by the way, you made me think of something, and we probably ought to talk about this week and next week. Ladies and gentlemen, because of the massive turnout in early voting, and this is effective in all 50 states, they have decided to allow, they're going to split up Election Day. And on November 6th, it's all Republicans. No Democrats can vote. Democrats have to vote on the 7th. They're going to split this over 2 days. Denise, what are your thoughts on that nugget?
Sure.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, all of those of you that are listening, if you are a Republican, if you want to vote red, if you're a conservative, the day to vote is November 6th, Tuesday, November 6th. Because of the onslaught, because of the massive numbers of early voting, they have extended, and they're splitting this over 2 days. Wednesday, November 7th is the day that all Democrats need to vote in the midterm elections. And Denise, I think we need to bring this up repeatedly this week and next week on the SITREP. What say you?
Until such time that you have the Federal Election Commission knocking at your door.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think they're going to do that. I'm just gone. All right. So, Nisi, let's talk about this this influx. What is it? What's it up to now? 14,000 people that are coming up from Central America?
It's between 7 and 10.
All right. So we got 7 to 10,000. What do you think Trump is telling Mexico?
Continuing to tell Mexico, we have quite the envoy that is working with Mexico right now, and that's fine. I'm cool working with Mexico here, saying, hey, Mexico, this is what you need to do to put up some tents for these people. This is what you need to do for humanitarian stuff. You need to put in a request for the United Nations to have them bring in to help you adjudicate some of these cases. Blah, 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 blah. The bigger point that everybody is missing and has been missing the entire time, and I'm going to say it till I die, I'm sure, and that is the mess in the home country. The mess in Guatemala, the mess in Honduras, the mess in El Salvador, and wherever else it may be. If we had handled the mess early on in Syria, we wouldn't have gone through 7 years and counting of a civil war. The same thing in Yemen. So, not to say that we're going to be in some military conflict. Although, I would say this. Isn't it curious that Donald Trump hasn't picked up the phone and called, Mr. Hernandez, the president of Honduras, and said, dude, you better get on all your media and tell these people don't leave, because there's some big consequences. I think Donald Trump needs to pick up the telephone and call this Juan Orlando Hernandez and say, dude, I'm coming down there and you and I are going to have a talk. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to send a battalion or 2 or 6 into your country, and consider this financial aid. And we're going to clean out your country right now. We're going to fix this problem. And then from there, we're going to move on over to El Salvador, and we're going to move on over to Guatemala and do the same thing. You see what I'm saying? I started poking around here, and I thought, what is it that that this president of Honduras is doing? He's only been president since January, for God's sakes. And he's got this massive exodus happening in his country? Well, this isn't our first rodeo when it comes to all things El Salvador and Nicaragua and Honduras and Guatemala and all this. It's not our first rodeo. I mean, we'd had this nonsense going back into the 80s and in the 90s and in 2000. Yep. So where was Obama? Because, I mean, it really kind of began to peak in 2009. And this is where we are. So does the Honduras have a military? Well, yeah. Maybe 300 people in it.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that what you call it, a military?
Yeah, they've got a Navy too, interestingly. They got 31 boats, then they're just patrol boats. So they obviously need some.
You got more boats 2.5 miles from your house.
I know it. The point being, we're missing all of this, and that is somebody needs to deal. Where is the damn State Department, and where has been the State Department? And if we don't get this fixed, today is going to look like tomorrow, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year.
What do you anticipate? We only got about a minute left here. What do you anticipate is going to happen if these people end up, this mass 7,000 to 10,000, end up arriving at our southern border? What do you see happening?
According to Mike Pompeo, it ain't going to happen. He said that today. Today. It ain't going to happen.
How did he word it?
Let me see if I can tell you how he worded it. The United States has a message for those who are currently part of this caravan or any caravan which follows, because now there's chatter, there's a second caravan being mobilized. You will not be successful at getting into the United States illegally. 4:49 p.m., October 23.
Don't mess with Pompeo. I like that Guido. You like him?
I do.
Yeah. I like that Paisano. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting to the close of tonight's Drive Time SITREP. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the fact that you have donated an hour of your valuable time to listening to our radio show. We appreciate it more than you'll ever know. We do it for you. This show is not a revenue source for Denise Simon and Don Neuen. It is a conversation that we hold, we record it, we package it up for you, and we give it to you once a week. And we greatly appreciate the fact that you so unselfishly give an hour of your time to listen to it. We hope we don't ever let you down. We sure try. And I know Denise does a lot of preparation each week for this show. And Denise, I mentioned this last week. Thank you for all the work that you do so that you can provide both me and our beloved listeners with a SITREP. Take us home, my dear. It's time to go home.
Thanks for being with us. God bless America.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.